Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
Upright Canine Encounter, Dwayyo Hexenwolf, in Frederick County, Maryland. I am not making an official report because it was so long ago, and I have always brushed this incident off. At the time I was about 11 years old, and I can't recall what year exactly, 1963 or so, since this was many years ago, and nobody believed me since I was a kid. I was spending the summer at my grandma's house on Shank Road in Middletown, Maryland, Frederick County, as I had for a couple of years in a row. I welcomed the summers I spent with grandma, except for the darn outhouse. If I had to go at night, it was a nuisance having to take grandma with me, which meant waking her up. It was an awful part of being there. One late night I had to get up to use the outhouse, and it was stark black outside. No lamp posts or outdoor lighting lined the main lane. Grandma had electricity, but it was only for the house inside, oven, and appliances. She had a TV, a very old floor model, and nobody watched it anyway, since there was not much TV on the Maryland airwaves back in the early 1960s. It had to be like 3 a.m. when I ventured outside. I didn't take a flashlight, and I didn't want to wake grandma up for finding the flashlight or for her to walk me to the outhouse. The outhouse was located far from the main grouping of structures on the property and the main house, for obvious reasons. It was not a full moon, but enough nighttime illumination in the sky that my eyes adjusted quickly to see the grounds. I could easily navigate my way using grandma's long and narrow flower garden as a guiding trail. My biggest fear was of black snakes and copperheads, because I was warned constantly to look out for them. I made it down to the outhouse and don't even remember hearing the usual night noises like crickets or owls. It seemed almost too quiet. I was a sharp and smart kid with a great imagination, but not enough to make this story up. I felt an uncanny sensation of being watched, and I started to get scared. I left the outhouse, peeked outside first, and for some reason I wanted to run back to the house, getting to safety as quickly as possible. It was a rough and long run, and I tired quickly and began walking the last few hundred feet to the porch of the house. Something told me to look back where I had been. To this day I wished I hadn't. What I saw was an impossible sight. This animal stepping through the backyard of grandma's property, just past the garden about 10 feet past the outhouse. It was this upright furry creature with a dog-wolf head. I have owned German shepherds from the age of 7, so the head was almost similar to the ears and snoot of a German shepherd dog. I stopped dead in my tracks, not believing my eyes because it was impossible. It had arms that had claw-like hands that hung out in front of it. As it turned its head and looked right at me, the eyes looked yellow and super reflective. Chills shot up my spine as it quickly walked on 2 legs that looked like real dog legs bending backwards, traveling from left to right, past her garden, into the old gravel lane, then across into the thicket of the woods where it disappeared. I heard the rustling through the weeds. It may have initially traveled from the usually full cow pasture that was up an incline, past the spring, and up to the cow pasture that was behind grandma's house. I shudder to think it was hiding behind the outhouse I was in, but that is a distinct possibility as well. Ever since that night, after being teased of the cliché of seeing the big bad wolf at grandma's house, nobody believed me and thought I made up this story for attention, like the imaginary friend syndrome of kids. From those teasing me, I just put it all behind me, buried the story forever, and never told another human being this tale. Until now.
Trucker shoots upright canine near Reed City, Michigan. My uncle had an encounter in the summer several years back. Only reason I believe him is because his whole life, he's always been a super serious, no bullcrap kind of guy. When he told the story, he sounded genuinely upset about it. He is a long-haul truck driver and was stopped on the side of the highway in a heavily wooded area. This was somewhere several miles in the middle of nowhere, but he said it was closest to Reed City, Michigan. I can't recall what he said he was doing, but he had to fix something before he could take off. Also, he didn't have a trailer on at the time. He had just gotten done fixing up his stuff and was about to climb into his vehicle when he saw a deer come towards him from the tree line. He said it looked like it might have been running from something. He assumed it might have been a bear. He was just getting ready to leave when he suddenly sees something looking at him through the passenger side window. He described it as having jet black fur and bright yellow eyes, as well as vicious-looking, snarling teeth. It was so close to him that he could see its fur blowing with the slight breeze that was coming through. The window was open, but it didn't seem to notice, as was evident when the creature put its paw up to the window, as if to press it against the window, but pulled it back in shock when it realized its paw actually entered the vehicle. My uncle typically carries a gun on him. At this time he had a heavy revolver. The exact name and caliber is beyond my memory right now. He pointed it at the Dogman and pulled the trigger, effectively shooting it directly in the face. Finally, the truck started moving fast enough for him to be confident that the thing wasn't following him, should it have survived the shot. He didn't bother waiting around to find out. He said he still gets disturbed when he thinks back to that event. He described it as giving off this aura of pure evil and ill intent in only the few seconds he faced it. He has nightmares about this creature to this day, and he refused to tell anyone about it until several years after it happened for fear of people thinking he had lost his mind. Another reason I'm able to buy his story is because he has never been interested in the occult, supernatural, paranormal, cryptids, etc. He had no idea what to make of this thing I saw him, but when he told me the story I told him to look into the Dogman. When he looked online, he said the artist depictions of the Dogman perfectly for what he saw that day.
Upright canine, possible skinwalker observed in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I grew up in New Mexico and still live in this state. My whole life, I've heard stories about skinwalkers, and I consider myself to be somewhat knowledgeable on the subject. I've always been interested in them and find them creepy yet fascinating, and I talk about them a lot, even though one of my Navajo friends insists that I shouldn't, and always leaves the room when I bring up the topic. Anyways, I live in a third-story apartment in North Albuquerque. The area of the city I live in is rather busy, even at night. There are lots of restaurants, businesses, and even a shopping mall nearby. One night, I was chilling alone at my place, eating some cereal and watching Netflix. It was late, about 1 a.m., and I was about ready to go to bed, when I hear barking from outside my window. This isn't uncommon in my apartment complex, as they do allow dogs that are under 40 pounds. But something was seriously wrong with the way this barking sounded. It was almost as if the dog was drowning or something, like half the barks were coming from underwater. I creep outside onto my balcony, and I see the source of the noise. It certainly looks like a dog, except for the fact that it's enormous, like the size of one of those Russian Caucasian mountain dogs. I've seriously never seen a dog that big before in person. It was standing in a dimly lit grassy courtyard area of my apartment complex. The lights are still yellow, and the bulbs are really old, so I couldn't make out the details of this animal. All I could honestly tell was that it was really big, really furry, and that it seemed to be pointed in my direction. When I stepped out into my balcony, the barking immediately stopped. I stared at the dog for a while, and it almost seemed like it was staring right back at me. We stayed like this for maybe 2 minutes or so, when I hear a loud honk from a car on the nearby highway. At this point, the dog stands up on its hind legs and sprints off toward the small arroyo near my complex. It was honestly extremely terrifying. I've never come that close to actually pooping my own pants. Of course, my first thought is that I just witnessed a skinwalker. The only thing is that I've never, ever heard or read about skinwalkers being in such a busy city or urban area. The scariest thing is that my Navajo friend has always told me that I need to stop talking about skinwalkers because that attracts their attention, so now I feel paranoid.
Upright Canine Encounter, Monongalia County, West Virginia. Hi, thank you for reading my email. I am reaching out to you for an opinion. It has to do with an experience I had a few weeks ago. I was driving west on Morgan Run Road, near Lubbock Lane in Monongalia County, West Virginia. This is close to Cheat Lake. It happened on June 8th around 7:30 p.m. I was on my way back to my friend's house. After I drove past Lubbock Lane, I noticed a tall figure move out, then back into the trees. I wasn't driving fast, so I got a good look at it, though it's still hard for me to believe what I saw. It turned back and looked at me. I swear it was a wolf standing on 2 legs. The head was huge with dark long hair. The body was almost like that of a powerful man, but it still had the characteristics of a wolf. I didn't get a good look at the legs, but they were definitely shaped like wolves. Very muscular arms with human-like hands and very long fingers or claws. When it looked at me, the eyes seemed to twinkle or shine as the head moved. The face was a wolf's face. Same snout and ears with a thick neck. I believe it had something in the right hand, but the body blocked it from my view. It just looked at me for a few seconds and then took a few steps into the brush. That was all I saw. I found some of the sightings reported to you on Google. I didn't notice any from West Virginia, but since this is near Pennsylvania, so I thought you may be interested. I haven't talked to anyone about this. This beast looked evil, and I'm not really sure I should have reported this. But it would be interesting if others had reported seeing something like this in the same area. JM.
Upright canine encounter, Hidden Valley Lake, Indiana. This is basically a Beast of Brer Road type sighting, but it happened in southern Indiana, far from Brer Road. I'm wondering if anyone else has had, or heard of, sightings in the same area. For the record, this is not a werewolf story. What I saw was an animal, not a shapeshifter. I know the beast is often called a werewolf, but I don't buy that explanation. My sighting happened between 1992 and 1995 because I only lived in the area during that time. My best guess is that it was 1992-1993 because I was coming home late at night, around 1 or 2 a.m. without my then fiancée, and she would have been with me after 1993. The sighting happened on State Line Road, just off Route 50 in southern Indiana, Ohio, right by Hidden Valley Lake. You can see on Google Maps that the area is still pretty wooded, even 25 years later. The usual caveats apply. I had not been drinking and I wasn't on drugs. I had just turned into State Line Road from Route 50, and I saw a large animal in the road. It looked like a huge dog hunched over roadkill. As I neared it, I began to suspect it was one of my neighbor's dogs. He had 2 Irish wolfhounds. If you don't know, those are huge dogs that stand about 3 foot at the shoulders. I assumed one of them had got out. By this time I was slowing down because the animal didn't seem aware of my car, and I was about 30 yards away. I was starting to plan how I was going to get a dog that big into my car so I could drive it home, and also wondering if wolfhounds were typically dangerous to approach. I was also trying to figure out if I should wake the neighbors up or just try and tie the dog up outside or something. As my mind raced through these thoughts, this all happened in just a few seconds. The animal finally turned and looked at my car, so I stopped the car completely. Its face looked more like the shape of a police dog's than a wolfhound, and that threw me. I remember wondering why my neighbor's dog looked so strange. And then the animal simply stood up on 2 legs and calmly walked off to the west, into the tall grass off the road. My mind at this point was still trying to reconcile how this was my neighbor's wolfhound. I literally thought he had trained his dogs to walk on 2 legs and had never told us. Then it started to sink in. The shape of the head was wrong, the build of the dog was too muscular, and it walked like a human, not a circus dog. My mind looped back to that, of course. It had walked off like a human on 2 legs. And its gaze had lingered on me as if its attitude was telling me, I didn't have to move, you know. The fur was long and shaggy and gray, although in the darkness I could have misjudged the color, and my mind filled it in with the color I was expecting to see on my neighbor's wolfhound. I watched it walk, still casually, until it was swallowed by the shadows and trees on the other side of the small field. I was terrified to drive the rest of the way home. I never mentioned it to anyone, but in the morning I asked my mom if the neighbor's dogs had got out, and when she asked why I wanted to know, I just said I thought I'd seen one. But both dogs were accounted for, and neither had got out. Then, about 10 years later, I heard Linda Godfrey on Coast to Coast talking about the Beast of Brer Road, and I was like, that's exactly what I saw. It was even the same time period as the original Brer Road flap. With that confirmation, I finally started to tell people about it to see if anyone else had seen anything like it. No one had, of course. So that's my story. Are there historical sightings of the beast in the southern Indiana-Ohio state line area? GL.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.